One thing that is most noticeable in the historic records of the African political leadership within countries is the heavy pre-, post- and independence burden crushing upon the governing and the governed. The very first two bone of contention every African leader must face is that of the very high and always almost undeniable demands of the governed, and the great pressure from the neo-colonialist Western powers. It is but factual that a remarkable number of African presidential leadership positions were seized through a coup d'etat. So also is it factual that quite a considerable number of these presidential leadership roles get seized through assassinations. This exposition video is aimed at opening the eyes of our fellow viewers to the top 15 African presidents that were assassinated directly or indirectly by Western powers as a result of their opposing actions against imperialism or neocolonialism. Some of these leaders were the cause of their own death. Number 1. Muammar Gaddafi, 1942 to 20th October 2011. His birth facts have his name recorded as Muammar Muhammad Abu Milia al-Gaddafi, but he is widely known for name Colonel Gaddafi. From 1969 to 1977, Colonel Gaddafi had Libya under his governance as a de facto leader, wherein he got labeled the revolution chairperson of the Libyan Arab Republic. From 1977 to 2011, Gaddafi was known as the brotherly leader of the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya. His core ideological values were basically guided towards the Arab nationalism and Arab socialism economic domains. However, in the course of his reign, he later adopted his own third-person internal political theory. Extraordinary to the enormous home-based impact and legacy Colonel Gaddafi wrought in Libya, and specifically his hometown Sirte, Colonel Gaddafi stands tall as one of the prominent, if not the greatest artifacts of the African Pan-African frontliners who strongly advocated for African unity. His method curbed neo-colonialism, imperialism, and the quest for African unity saw the ever-growing hatred for him by Western leaders and other greedy dependent African leaders. Colonel Gaddafi played the primordial role of leading the transformation of the Organization of the African Union, OAU, into the African Union by seeing into the success of the Sirte Declaration adopted by the OAU on the 9th of September 1999 in Libya. Despite the contributions he made towards the establishment of the AU 2002, Colonel Gaddafi only assumed office as chairperson in the year 2009 to 2010. He, however, attempted to failure extending his term of office as AU chairperson on the grounds of not having been able to execute his grand agenda for the AU. Having served as paramount ruler in Libya for over 4 decades after taking power in a coup, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi met his doom on 20th October 2011 while caught up in the 2011 NATO-backed uprising that destroyed his long legacy and regime as ruler in Libya. The 24th of December last year 2021 saw a civilian democratic leadership in Libya for a while now, wherein Colonel Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi, aged 49, is controversially part of the presidential race candidates. Number 2. Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, 21 December 1949 to 15 October 1987. Commonly called Thomas Sankara, he bears the mark of being an iconic vessel with very high standards of impact and ethical values amongst the history of African presidents. His account records him a Burkinabe charismatic military officer. Thomas Isidore Sankara, after his appointment as Prime Minister in 1983, saw into a spark of a dispute between him and the regime, which eventually led to his imprisonment. While Sankara was caught up under house arrest, his die-hard supporters, radically by way of a popularly aspirated coup, took hold of power on his behalf later that year, 1983. With reputation as the 33-year-old charismatic Pan-African president of Burkina Faso in 1983 and the Che Guevara of Africa. After assuming office as president of Burkina Faso in 1983, Thomas Sankara held fast to the Marxist revolutionary economic ideologies and promptly initiated an economic, ecological, and social change initiative, for which he further stripped off the colonial name of the country from the French appellation Upper Volta into Burkina Faso, which means Land of the Incorruptible People. The new name of the country accorded the people with the prerogative to be called Burkinabe, which means upright people. Remarkable for patriotism, great love for his citizens, and the love for his country, and also the love for Africa. Sankara's leadership was characterized by an austere lifestyle, as he cut down the salary he earned and that of every other civil servant. Thomas Sankara had an unwavering commitment to the education of the citizens. His short stay in office saw the outstanding elevation of the educational system and the literacy level from 13% in 1983 up to 73% in 1987. Sankara boosted the economy significantly as he took up the lands owned by chiefs and distributed them over to the poor farmers, who in turn used the lands to farm cotton for commercial purposes, adding to the country's GDP. Sankara advocated at the continental level for a united Africa as he implored on African countries to denounce all forms of neocolonialism and also imperialism, as he adopted the foreign anti-imperialism theory, which was a huge threat to the French dominance in Africa. Sadly, a coup plotted and executed on the 15th of October 1987, barely after taking office, saw into the unfortunate death of Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, as he was brutally shot by military elements, killing the charismatic Pan-Africanist. His death saw into the succession of his very close friend, Blaise Compaoré, who was one of the brains who helped Sankara ascend the presidential seat. Blaise Compaoré later fled the country. Charges were raised against him and others who allegedly took part in the assassination of Sankara. Sankara's critics were keen to observe that Sankara was the type reluctant to align to the idea of democracy in line to pluralism, and hardly give an ear to the constructive criticism or varying opinions, as he often slams his opponents to jail and sometimes without a formal trial. Amnesty International itself has equally noted such. Sankara's wife raised accusations at France for masterminding Sankara's assassination, for challenging the French neocolonialism and imperialism policy practices in Africa. Number 3. Samuel Canyon Doe, 6th May 1951 to 9th September 1990. Samuel Doe was a Liberian head of state and soldier from 1980 to 1990. Doe hails from the Kran or Wee tribe and got integrated into the Liberian army when he was of age 18. Doe grew through his ranks and eventually became a master sergeant in 1979. With coups being one of the major weapons most African leaders will use to secure power for themselves, Doe in 1989 masterminded and headed a troop of constituting soldiers of the Kran tribe who utterly invaded the Liberian executive mansion, thereby executing the serving president William R. Tolbert. Doe later had his legislative arm of government at work, whom in turn judged 14 other close executives of President William R. Tolbert, finding them guilty and utterly executing them. Doe assumed the role of a general after the coup and created a bench of 14 low-ranking officers, together with whom they ruled the country under a military regime. Doe and his regime suspended the existing constitution of the country for 4 years until a new constitution was established, approved by virtue of a referendum in 1984 and enacted and promulgated same year. The following year, 1985, was to witness a new civilian governance for which an election was conducted and proclaimed to the victory of Doe. It was, however, impeded as the results were highly criticized to be controversial, as keen observers outrightly termed the election rigged. Doe, like every other indigenous Liberian, happened to pulse resentment towards the prerogatives at the disposal of the descendants of the American slaves that were freed, who equally founded the colony of Liberia in 1882. As time unfolded, Doe became an object of opposition from both within and without. His governance was criticized to be highly corrupt and made of brutes. Economic decay was infesting the economics of his country and eventually serving the purpose of a huge threat to his term of office. His life was continually under the threat of assassination, as he could only manage to suppress it by more brutality. The several acts of incompetence, brutality, and tribalism evident in the administration of Doe sparked a great rebellion from eastern Liberia and rapidly spread about, with several rebellions fragments in all of the country by 1989. 1990 saw into the outgrowing number of rebel groups whom had made their way into Monrovia. Doe, however, refused to yield power, and the civil war continued until under the leadership of Prince Johnson and his rebel group. Doe was captured and assassinated. Number 4. Muhammad Anwar el-Sadat, 25th December 1918 to 6th October 1981. Muhammad Anwar el-Sadat, from 15 October 1970 to 6 October 1981, served as the third president of Egypt. Sadat's entry into power was preceded by the Egyptian Revolution of 1952 that was effectuated by a group of free officers, spearheaded by Sadat himself being the senior member. This revolution saw the overthrowing of King Farouk. Amongst the various leaders that led Egypt until the time of President Sadat, he was the only leader who accorded recognition to the existence of the State of Israel ever since its creation in 1948. The leadership of President Sadat saw the signing of Camp David Accord between Egypt and Israel in 1978, which was outlining the framework for peace in the Middle East. This act incorporated a clear boundary of restriction of the autonomy unique to Palestinians. President Sadat's leadership saw into the signing of a memorable interstate peace treaty between Israel and Egypt in 1979. Several Arab nations frowned at Egypt for signing a separate treaty with Israel, and they went ahead to isolate Egypt from corporate and diplomatic affairs. The circumstance that surrounded the assassination of President Sadat connotes an aerial display of a military parade in Cairo that had the sitting of the President Sadat and other foreign diplomats in view. Armed gunners in the course of the occasion jumped out of a military truck right before the viewing center and forced their way towards spectators, wrecking officials with automatic gunfire. With the tight security at the occasion notwithstanding, the rebels had their way through with further aggression as they emptied their rifles into President Sadat in a well-calculated move of intelligence. By the time the presidential guards and the forces opened more fire, shots had gotten hold of several dignitaries and other diplomats like the Cuban ambassador that came to witness the occasion. Several people were wounded and some US forces were killed. President Sadat, in the midst of the chaos, however, managed to be lifted with the aid helicopter and was taken to a military medical facility wherein he gave up the ghost. Following President Sadat's assassination, more than 700 people were rounded up. 25 faced a secret trial, 5 of whom were then executed, and 17 others given prison sentences and hard labor. Vice President Hosni Mubarak succeeded President Sadat as head of state. Number 5. Patrice Emery Lumumba, 1961. Patrice Emery Lumumba was a Congolese political figure and an active independence activist who served the Democratic Republic of Congo initially as the Prime Minister after independence in 1960, at that time the Republic of Congo. From the month of June towards September 1960, Patrice Lumumba stood his ranks as the radical figurehead of the Congolese movement, active to the independence struggle, resisting the Belgian colonial and imperialism regime. The prominent act of Lumumba's resistance was that which he utterly stood against the Belgian government when they announced the program that was expected to lead Congo to independence that was going to commence with local elections in December 1959. Henri Lumumba perceived this program as having an underlying agenda of installing pliable puppets before independence. As such, Lumumba called for a boycott of the program. This act of his provoked the Belgian authorities to respond in repression. It sparked a clash on October 20th that witnessed the death of 30 persons in Stanleyville. Patrice Lumumba was later on, through a coup d'etat, captured, tortured and assassinated with the great support of the Belgian authorities, United States, and the United Nations on January 17, 1961 in Katanga province. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba equally saw into the death of his big dream of a united, democratic and ethnically pluralist and pan-Africanist Congo. Number 6. Marien Ngouabi, 1977. January 1, 1969 to March 18, 1977 saw President Marien Ngouabi preside over Congo as third president since independence. Highly influenced by the economic ideologies of Marxism, President Ngouabi during the start of his tenure utterly transformed the state of Congo into a Marxist-learned state and named it after the People's Republic of Congo. President Ngouabi founded the Congolese Workers' Party that operated as the country's sole political party. Ngouabi's form of leadership took the pattern of the Jacobinism form of governance that saw the hyper-concentration of powers at the center and less effective at the suburbs. Ngouabi hailed from the north, and his government had the control of powers eccentric further away from the south. This approach of Ngouabi created a huge opposition from the communists of the south, the political people of Brazzaville, bureaucratic centralism and repression. Ngouabi's tribalistic stance created opposition even in the youth political Miller organizations. President Ngouabi got assassinated on March 18, 1977. A couple of persons suspected of having to do with the murder of President Ngouabi were tried and equally assassinated in return. The Congolese after the assassination were now placed under the leadership of the military as interim until a suited candidate for a decent civilian rule was spotted. Number 7. Laurent Désiré Kabila, 2001. Coming to power as the third president of the DRC, being a revolutionary and politician, Laurent Kabila came to power on May 77, 1997, after overthrowing Mobutu. 1998 saw a shift in the stance of the allies of Kabila that were principally in Uganda and Rwanda as they rose in rebellion against him and his crusade for Congolese democracy, leading to another Congo War. In proactive measures, Kabila managed to create new allies in Angola, Namibia, and Zimbabwe, who managed to hold the west and the south of the DRC on behalf of Kabila. July 1999 came with some relief for Congo as negotiations and dialogue gave way for peace, so much so that this action led to the withdrawal of all foreign soldiers in the country. The withdrawal of foreign forces had led to another form of insecurity on the ground. This led to the assassination of Kabila on January 16, 2001, as he was shot and killed while in his office. The death of Laurent Kabila had his 29-year-old son, Joseph Kabila, assume power 8 days later. Number 8. Melchior Ndadaye, 1993. Melchior Ndadaye, a remarkable personality in the history of the state of Burundi. He was a Burundian intellectual personality and a Hutu political party politician whom in the history of Burundi was the very first democratically elected president. Ndadaye was aged 40. Having grown up witnessing the rigorous ethnic wars of 1972, Ndadaye became very passionate in dissolving the existing ethnic division in Burundi that was so evident between the Tutsis and the Hutus. Several years of Tutsi rule had gone past under the leadership of the incumbent president, Pierre Buyoya. The rest of the Hutu political parties had unified their interest in support to select Melchior Ndadaye, a Hutu, as the president of Burundi against Pierre Buyoya. Every October 21st, Burundi engages in the commemoration of the assassination of Melchior Ndadaye. This culture follows the account of Ndadaye's assassination in 1993, which records that, upon his assumption of office, his passion to break the ethnic divide led Ndadaye the Hutu to appoint Tutsis in top government positions, including the post of the Prime Minister. With the measures Ndadaye put in place to curb the divide in ethnicity notwithstanding, less than 3 months after Ndadaye assumed office, a coup intended to abort governance of the Hutu government sparked up. On October 21, 1993, under the guise of protection, Tutsi security elements escorted Ndadaye and other top-ranking government officials to a secret location and brutally had them all murdered. This coup was, however, a fatal failure, but it saw one of the most devastating events of Burundi, as the assassination of the president sparked a severe rage across the national territory. The radio and mass media fueled the burning flame. The spark of retaliation before long, an estimated 100,000 Hutu and Tutsi Burundians lay dead. Number 9. Sylvanus Olympio, 1963. Olympio is generally known as the father of the Togolese independence. Some refer to him as the prototype of the surreptitiously anti-French head of state. These attributes given to Olympio come by virtue of being one of the origins of Lomé, born in 1902. This explains to his birth occurring under German colonization era. Meanwhile, he received education at the London School of Economics. His varied environs of socialization and interaction gave him that equality of multiculturalism and a mastery of the dealing of colonial countries. He basically mastered close to 5 languages. The standards he erected for himself, his cultural depth, were utterly a great deterring factor to the French assimilation policy. Olympio had his tactics that were not very direct in opposition to France. In early 1963, Olympio considered abandoning the franc zone CFA for a Togolese currency accredited by the Dutch mark. And evidently, Olympio was dangerous to the French than a majority of leaders they could easily lure into the tune of their deceit. Away from the threat Olympio was posing on the French, there was equally the existence of the hate from other Togolese who served under the French army and were suggested by the French to work in the National Army under Olympio, for which Olympio declined, leaving them unemployed. The narration that gives record as to the assassination of Olympio tells how on Saturday, 12th of January 1963, a group of 6 commandos launched an attack on the presidential residence of Olympio, which was barely under military protection. The attack met with the family of Sylvanus Olympio. Meanwhile, Olympio had been alerted to the attack and quickly initiated an escape. Olympio sought refuge within the bounds of the United States Embassy in Lomé. The coup on Olympio began at 11 p.m. and by 7:15 the following day, the corpse of Olympio laid cold-blooded in front of the US Embassy. Testimonies of witnesses and informants analyzed could better tell who was behind the assassination of Olympio. Number 10. Juvenal Habyarimana and Cyprien Ntaryamira, Rwanda and Burundi, 1994. On the evening of 6 April 1994, a Dassault Falcon 50 airplane was shot down as it approached Kigali International Airport for a stopover en route Bujumbura, Burundi. In the flight were Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and Burundian President Cyprien Ntaryamira. Juvenal's death escalated the already heated up Hutu and Tutsi ethnic tensions in a country where tribal identity and allegiance meant everything and could solely determine one's chances of survival. This sparked off the Rwandan genocide of 1994, which saw almost 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus massacred to death within a space of 4 months. Juvenal's death is still a subject of controversy in Rwanda. One version the official version has is that the plane was taken down by Hutu extremists desperate for an excuse to wipe out Tutsis. Another version holds Tutsi fighters, allegedly led or ordered by Paul Kagame, the current president, responsible. Habyarimana, a Hutu, served from 1973 to 1994. Number 11. General Murtala Muhammad, Nigeria, 8 November 1938 to 13 February 1976. General Murtala Muhammad of Nigeria was the head of state and chief commander of the armed forces while Nigeria was under the military regime. He was assassinated in Lagos, Nigeria on February 13, 1976 in an attempted coup. General Murtala Muhammad's Mercedes saloon car was intercepted by Lieutenant Colonel Buka Suka Dimka, who made it through with his indecent plan assassinating Tafawa Balewa. Wrapped into his own deceit by believing that the coup went through successfully, Lieutenant Colonel Buka Suka Dimka headed straight to NBC to proclaim the successful assassination and equally justify the reason. To his greatest disappointment, he was almost gotten hold of before he could venture the second segment of his speech. Buka Suka Dimka managed to escape. However, karma met with him on the 15th of May 1976, after which he was publicly executed alongside his group. Other people such as General Olusegun Obasanjo and Danjuma, who left their houses later, were also targeted for an assassination, but managed to avoid it. This may have been due to the radio broadcast of the assassination, as well as the fact that they did not leave their respective offices as early as Murtala did. Number 12. João Bernardo Vieira, Guinea-Bissau, March 2, 2009. João Bernardo Vieira was a Bissau-Guinean politician who was the president of Guinea-Bissau from 1980 to 1999, except for a 3-day period in 1984 and from 2005 to 2009. Reports say João Bernardo Vieira was assassinated by soldiers incognito. He was reportedly tortured before he was shot severally to confirm his death. João Bernardo was originally a military leader who seized power after a bloodless coup in 1980, and he stayed in power until 1984, then assumed power again and ruling for the second time. He was ousted in 1999. He gained back power in a democratic election for the third time in 2005 after returning from exile. He died a day after his army chief of staff, General Batista Tagme Nawai, was killed in a bomb blast in his own residence. Many people held that these two deaths were not a coincidence. It was rumored that Vieira's death was a retaliation for the bomb blast that had happened earlier. Number 13. General Ibrahim Bari Mai Nassara. General Ibrahim Bari Mai Nassara was a Niger military officer and a diplomat who ruled Niger until his assassination during the military coup of April 1999. Ibrahim Bari Mai Nassara seized power through a military coup that saw him remove the first democratically elected president of Niger from office. Mai Nassara was assassinated on April 9, 1999 by his own military convoy while attempting to flee the country through the Niamey airport in the capital city of Niger, Niamey. Mai Nassara's assassination was as a result of being dissident in his post and denied resigning despite being called upon to do so severally. He had the country so indebted that several government workers went months unpaid, and as such, it led to his assassination. Mai Nassara's close family members and other chosen officials had buried him. The then Prime Minister, Mr. Ibrahim Hassan Mayaki, said the death was the result of an unfortunate accident. Number 14. Muhammad Boudiaf, June 29, 1992. Muhammad Boudiaf was an Algerian politician who was the founder of the Revolutionary National Liberation Front, FLN. His liberation movement led the Algerian independence. He was born June 23, 1919. He lived here from 1954 to 1962, and after a 27-year exile, he was the president of Algeria in 1992. Boudiaf fought in the French army during World War II. Notwithstanding, by 1950, Boudiaf became the figurehead in the nationalist movement against the French. In 1954, he joined forces with Ahmed Ben Bella on the FLN Leadership Council. After his capturing and imprisonment by the French in 1956 to 1962, Boudiaf and Ben Bella were released to form a provisional government in newly independent Algeria, with Boudiaf as deputy premier. Boudiaf opposed President Ben Bella's autocratic rule. Threats posed on him led him into exile in Morocco in 1964, where he continually denounced the increasing corrupt FLN. In January 1992, with the Islamic fundamentalists on the verge of winning parliamentary elections, he was invited to return as the head of a military-backed Council of State. Although he appeared to have gained public support for his announced reforms, he was shot and killed while giving a speech. One of his bodyguards was suspected of the shooting. Number 15. William Richard Tolbert Jr. William Richard Tolbert Jr. was born on May 13, 1913 in Bensonville, Liberia. He was a West African politician who was president of Liberia from 1971 to 1980. Tolbert grew up under training as a civil servant, where he was able to enter the Liberian's House of Representatives in 1946 in the place of true Whig Party